Anybody? What else you talked about? What other people have said that you're interested in? What your group talked about?
Well, we noticed that you never said, or at least that we heard, "You're right."
Yeah.
You said, "Or you're wrong." You said, "Prove it."
When I first started teaching, I read a quote that really has stuck with me for a really long time, and it was that learning is not what comes out of the mouth of the educator, but what happens inside the other person. We can say all the things that we want in class, but it's only when students are saying them and students are doing them that we know what's gone into the other person. And I think a student-centered classroom is one where that's our focus.
Even with the student who was totally, flustered, you didn't just say, okay, let's sit down and do this. You said, okay, what do we see? You still asked those little guiding questions to help them find something to latch onto. And then you supported them for a couple more minutes and maybe a couple more questions until you felt like, okay, you're walking, we're good, okay? You didn't just step in and sit down and do the problem.
Student-centered often gets misinterpreted as, well, just give them a problem and sit in front of the room and read your paper. But it's incredibly active for the teacher because we have to draw out what their thinking is and respond constantly. It's this constant back and forth.
Yeah.
So talk to me through your
So
column.
I had to look at the $6 on the sides, and then I had to look at how many roses. So I knew $6 for 12 roses, $6 for 8 roses when I went down.
I have things that I want to come out in the classroom, and the goal of an active teacher in a student-centered classroom is asking the questions that get students to say the things that you want to say. A student-centered classroom revolves around effective questioning.
So how did people get started?
The bulk of the class is going to be me facilitating that conversation where students are talking about the mathematics. Because again, if I can say it, good, but I don't know how that's going into the ears of the other person. But if they're saying it, then I do. I know because it's coming from them.
So step 3, all of a sudden it's 12 times 75 cents equals $9. Raise your hand and what is that? Where did that come from? Lisa.
That's the money that she's taking in when she sells 12 roses. Yeah, if she sold 12 roses at 75 cents each, she's going to take in $9.
In the Institute, I had very specific goals for the mathematics that we were going to do. I had specific goals about the problem-solving strategies that we were going to talk about. But in terms of the actual math, it was done by the participants in the workshop. I came in prepared for participants when they were stuck to try to help them get unstuck. I had specific strategies that I thought would help, but they were doing the math.
Okay, wait, so this is $1, this is $2.
Well, okay, now you know what she paid for each one.
50 cents.
Okay.
So then,
He's an 8th grader.
okay, wait, don't tell me. Okay, hold on. So she paid 50 cents for each rose, right?
Doing math in the classroom is not just the calculations. That's not the math I'm talking about. I'm talking about the problem, the reasoning, the working through it. That's the mathematics that we need to, A, ask them questions to get them doing, but also ask them questions to get them to reflect on what they just did.
Are there any similarities? What similarities do you see between those two solution methods?
They both group something and take a small set to make a conclusion about the whole thing, right? So like.
Can you talk more about that? How did each of them do that?
Sure. So what Maggie did is
A student-centered classroom, again, it comes back to that question, what does it mean to do mathematics? I read this quote, it was a teacher talking about their own experience and saying, when I started teaching, I thought a good teacher was someone who could explain something in a way everybody could understand. And they talked about how they shifted from that idea to the idea that I think being a good teacher is helping somebody else explain something in a way that they can be understood. That's what we're trying to do in a student-centered classroom.